The alarm woke Susan White at 3 in the morning. Red lights flashed on her bedside console. She got up quickly, her mind clear despite the early hour. Years of military training had taught her to wake up fast. "Admiral White, please report. To command immediately," said the voice from her console. Susan dressed in her uniform and walked quickly through the empty halls of Earth Defense Headquarters. The building was underground, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Most people on Earth did not know it existed. When she entered the main control room, she saw dozens of officers staring at the big screen on the wall. No one spoke. Susan looked at the screen and felt her heart beat faster. A fleet of strange ships had just passed Jupiter. They were heading toward Earth. "How many?" she asked. General Frank Harris turned to her. His face was pale. "About 200 large vessels. We detected them an hour ago when they came out of some kind of spacefold near Saturn. Have they sent any messages?" "Nothing yet. But they're moving in perfect formation. This isn't a natural phenomenon or a mistake. They're coming here on purpose." Susan nodded and took her place at the command table. The room was silent except for the beeping of computers. On the big screen, the alien ships moved closer. "Wake the president," Susan said, "and call the United Nations Space Council. Everyone needs to be here." Within an hour, the room was full. President Nathan Rogers stood beside Susan, watching the alien fleet approach. Representatives from other countries joined by secure video link. "What do we know about them?" asked the president. "Very little," Susan replied. "Their technology is far more advanced than ours. Those ships are massive. The largest ones are about 5 miles long, and they're fast. At their current speed, they'll reach Earth orbit in 6 hours. As if on cue, all the screens in the room flickered. A face appeared, at least they thought it was a face. It had 6 eyes arranged in a circle, and what looked like a mouth filled with small tentacles. The skin was bluish-gray. "People of Earth," the creature said in perfect English. "I am Commander Zexthal of the Arctarian Empire. Your planet is now under our authority. You will surrender all military assets and pledge loyalty to the Empire. You have 48 hours to comply." The screen went dark. The room erupted in noise as everyone spoke at once. President Rogers raised his hand for silence. "Admiral White, what are our options?" Susan took a deep breath. "Sir, based on our scans, their ships have weapon systems we can't even understand. Our missiles and lasers would be useless against them. If this turns into a fight, we lose." The Chinese representative spoke up. "Perhaps we should negotiate? Ask for terms?" "No," said General Harris. "That's what they expect. Every species they've encountered probably begged for mercy. We need to do something different." Susan looked at the president. "Sir, it's time to activate Project Dreadnought." A few people in the room gasped. Most looked confused. "Are you sure?" asked the president. "Yes, sir. This is exactly the scenario we've been preparing for." President Rogers nodded slowly. "Do it." Susan entered a code into her console. A new screen appeared, requesting her retinal scan and voice confirmation. "Admiral Susan White authorizing activation of Project Dreadnought. Authentication code Sierra November 94 Delta." The computer processed for a moment. "Authentication accepted. Project Dreadnought activation sequence initiated." Susan turned to the room. "For those who don't know, Project Dreadnought is a joint program that's been running in secret for 50 years. After we discovered an alien scout ship crashed in Antarctica in 2045, we realized we weren't alone in the universe, and we might not be safe." She brought up images on the main screen showing massive underground facilities on Mars. Using technology. From the crashed ship, we built factories on Mars hidden from any watching eyes. Those factories built more factories, which built ships. Warships. We call them Dreadnoughts. They're bigger and more powerful than anything we have in Earth orbit. The Russian representative leaned forward. "How many ships are we talking about?" Susan smiled slightly. 500,000 fully crewed and ready for battle." The room went completely silent. "That's impossible," someone whispered. "It was the greatest secret project in human history," Susan explained. Every nation contributed resources and people. We've been training crews in secret space stations in the asteroid belt. When nations appeared to be fighting on Earth, they were actually working together on Mars. On the screen, they could see activity starting on the surface of Mars. Huge doors were opening in areas that had looked like ordinary craters. The Arcturians think we're helpless, Susan continued. They've probably conquered many worlds this way, show up with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and take over with minimal resistance. But humanity had a head start. We've been preparing for something like this for decades. President Rogers straightened his shoulders. How long until the Dreadnoughts are ready? The first wave will be ready to launch in 2 hours. All 500,000 will be operational within 12 hours. And the crews? Already on board? 3 million of our best people have been living on Mars training for this day. The president nodded. Send a message to the Arcturian commander. Tell him we need the full 48 hours to prepare our response. We want to buy time. Yes, sir. As the others discussed strategy, Susan walked to the window and looked up at the sky. Soon those alien ships would be visible from Earth. People would be afraid. But they didn't know what was coming. They thought Earth would stay quiet. She said softly to herself. They were wrong. On Mars, deep below the red surface, lights came on in massive hangars. Row after row of warships began powering up. Crews took their positions. Officers gave orders. Weapon systems came online. Earth was about to show the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. Colonel Alan Price stood in the main hangar of Mars Base Alpha, watching as crews rushed to their ships. For decades, he had trained these men and women for this exact moment. Now it was finally happening. Status report, he said into his comm. Unit. First wave is at 90% readiness, replied his second-in-command, Major Lisa Chen. 10,000 Dreadnoughts will be ready to launch in 30 minutes. Alan nodded. 10,000 warships was already more than humans had ever put in space before. And it was just the beginning. What about the Arcturians? He asked. They've reached Earth orbit. Their ships are positioned over major cities, classic intimidation tactic. On the massive screens around the hangar, Alan could see feeds from Earth. The alien ships were visible in the sky now, huge dark shapes blocking the stars. People were gathering in streets, looking up. Some prayed, some cried. Most just stared, in silence. They have no idea what's coming, Alan said quietly. Lisa checked her tablet. Admiral White has sent the message asking for the full 48 hours. The Arcturians agreed but demanded that all Earth governments send representatives to their mothership in 24 hours to discuss surrender terms. Perfect. That gives us time to get all our ships ready. Alan walked through the hangar, inspecting the first wave of Dreadnoughts. Each ship was a marvel of human engineering combined with reverse-engineered alien technology. They were sleek and black, shaped like arrowheads with powerful engines and weapon systems that could tear through almost any known material. Every ship had a crew of 600, all trained for years in secret facilities throughout the solar system. They were the best pilots, engineers, and soldiers Earth had to offer. "Colonel," called a voice. Alan turned to see Dr. Samantha Kelly walking toward him. She was the lead scientist who had helped develop the Dreadnought technology, the shield. "Systems are fully operational on all ships," she reported, "and we've finished installing the new targeting computers. They'll be able to lock onto Arcturian weak points automatically." "Good work, Doctor," Alan said. "You should be proud. Without your team, none of this would be possible." Samantha nodded, but her expression remained serious. "These ships will win the battle, but what about after? The Arcturians might have allies. This could be the beginning of a much larger war." "One step at a time," Alan replied. "First, we save Earth. Then we'll deal with whatever comes next." Back on Earth, Admiral White sat in a secure room with President Rogers and the leaders of the world's major powers. They were watching a live feed from Mars. "The first wave is almost ready," Susan explained. "Colonel Price reports they'll launch within 30 minutes. "And the Arcturians won't detect them?" asked the Chinese president. "No. The Dreadnoughts use a special stealth system. They'll be invisible until they're right on top of the Arcturian fleet. President Rogers looked troubled. What if this leads to all-out war? We could be putting Earth in even more danger. With respect, Mr. President, Susan said firmly, we're already at war. The Arcturians didn't come here to make friends. They came to conquer. If we surrender, we lose everything. Our freedom, our resources, maybe even our lives. This is our only chance. The room fell silent as everyone considered her words. Very well, said President Rogers after a moment. Proceed with the operation. On the Arcturian mothership, Commander Zexthal was pleased. Everything was going according to plan. The humans had asked for time, just like all the other species before them. Soon their leaders would arrive to surrender, and another world would join the Empire. Have we analyzed their defenses? Zexthal asked his second-in-command. Yes, Commander. They have primitive weapon systems, nuclear missiles, a few laser platforms in orbit, and some fighter aircraft. Nothing that could harm our ships. And their communications? We're monitoring everything. No unusual activity. Most of their transmissions show panic and confusion, as expected. Zexthal made a sound that might have been a laugh. Excellent. Begin landing preparations. I want ground forces ready to deploy as soon as they surrender. What the Arcturians didn't know was that humanity's real communications were happening through a secret network, completely separate from the regular channels. Every message about Project Dreadnought was invisible to alien monitoring. On Mars, the countdown had begun. The massive doors on the surface opened wider, revealing the fleet of warships below. All crew to battle stations, announced Colonel Price over the base-wide system. First wave launch in 5 minutes. Inside each dreadnought, crews sat at their stations. Engines hummed to life. Weapon systems came online. Shield generators powered up. This is it, Alan said to Lisa as they took their positions on the command bridge of the flagship, EDS Defiance. The moment we've been preparing for, our entire careers, Lisa nodded. The Arcturians have no idea what they're in for. The countdown reached 0. With a roar that shook the Martian surface, the first 10,000 dreadnoughts rose from their underground hangars. They moved in perfect formation, accelerating quickly away from the red planet. Earth couldn't see them yet. The Arcturians couldn't detect them, but they were coming. In her command center on Earth, Admiral White watched the ships on her special display. She smiled slightly. The first wave has launched, she announced to the room of world leaders. They'll reach Earth orbit in 3 hours. By then, the second wave will be launching. And if this doesn't work? Someone asked. Susan's expression turned grim. Then humanity falls. But I don't think that's going to happen. The Arcturians made one critical mistake. What's that? Asked President Rogers. They thought Earth would stay quiet, she replied. They had no idea we've been building the largest fleet in the galaxy. Above Earth, the Arcturian ships continued their silent watch, unaware that humanity's response was already on its way. The first wave of human dreadnoughts reached the dark side of the moon. They slowed and took position, hidden from both Earth and the Arcturian fleet. On the command bridge of the EDS Defiance, Colonel Alan Price looked at the tactical display. The alien ships were arranged in a standard orbital pattern above Earth, unaware of what was coming. Second wave has launched from Mars, reported Major Lisa Chen. They'll be here in 2 hours. Third wave begins launch in 30 minutes. Alan nodded. Status of stealth systems? All ships report full functionality. The Arcturians haven't detected us. The plan was simple but bold. Once all 5 waves were in position, a total of 50,000 ships, they would surround the Arcturian fleet and reveal themselves all at once. The shock alone might be enough to force a surrender. Message from Earth Command, said the Y communications officer. Admiral White wants an update. Alan pressed a button on his chair. Admiral, first wave is in position. We're waiting for the rest of the fleet before we make our move. Admiral Susan White's voice came through clearly. Good. The Arcturian commander has requested a video meeting with Earth's leaders in 1 hour. We'll keep them talking until you're ready. On Earth, the alien ships loomed in the sky like dark clouds. People stayed in their homes watching news reports and waiting. Many had no idea that humanity's real defense was already gathering in space. Inside a secure bunker, Susan White and President Rogers prepared for their video call with Commander Zex Thal. Their job was to buy time while the Dreadnought fleet assembled. "Remember," Susan said, "we need to keep them talking for at least 3 more hours. Ask questions, request explanations, anything to drag it out." The President nodded. "I understand." The screen lit up, showing the alien commander. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence as he looked at the humans. "President Rogers," Zex Thal said, "I am pleased you have agreed to discuss the terms of your surrender." "We haven't agreed to surrender," the President replied calmly. "We've agreed to talk." The alien made a clicking sound that might have been annoyance. "Your situation is hopeless. My fleet can destroy your major cities within minutes. Why delay the inevitable?" "We have questions first," said Susan. "What happens to our people if we surrender? What rights would we have under Arctarian rule?" As Susan and the President kept the alien commander talking, more dreadnoughts arrived behind the moon. The second wave joined the first, then the third. By the time the fourth wave reached position, over 40,000 human warships were gathered, invisible to the Arctarians. On the bridge of the Defiance, Alan received confirmation that the final wave had launched from Mars. "All ships report ready," said Lisa. "Weapons and shields at full power." Alan took a deep breath. This was the moment that would decide humanity's future. "Send the signal to Earth Command," he ordered. "We're ready to begin." In the bunker, Susan received the message during her conversation with Zex Thal. She gave a small nod to the President. "Commander," said President Rogers, "we've considered your demands and have made our decision." The alien leaned forward. "And what is your answer?" "Humanity does not surrender," the President said firmly. Zex Thal's face changed color slightly. "Then you have chosen destruction. We will begin bombardment immediately." Susan stepped forward. "Before you do, Commander, perhaps you should look behind you." On the Arctarian mothership, alarms suddenly blared. Officers rushed to their stations as the sensor displays lit up with thousands of new contacts. "What is happening?" demanded Zex Thal. His second-in-command looked up from a screen, his face showing shock. "Ships, Commander, thousands of ships. They just appeared all around us." The human dreadnoughts had deactivated their stealth systems all at once, revealing themselves in perfect formation around the Arctarian fleet. For every alien ship, there were now hundreds of human vessels, their weapons aimed and ready. Zex Thal stared at the display in disbelief. "Impossible. Where did they come from?" On the video screen, Susan White smiled. "We built them, in secret, for 50 years. This is a trick," Zex Thal said. "An illusion." "No trick," replied Susan. "Those are Earth dreadnoughts. 500,000 of them will be in position within the hour. Each one is armed with weapons that can destroy your ships. This is just the first 50,000. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Zex Thal felt fear. "How? Your planet shows no signs of such technology." "We kept it hidden," said President Rogers. "On Mars and in the asteroid belt. We've been preparing for this day for generations." On the Defiance, Alan watched as the Arctarian ships began to move, breaking their perfect formation as they tried to respond to the surprise. "They're powering up weapons," reported the tactical officer. "Hold position," Alan ordered. "Don't fire unless fired upon." The largest Arctarian battleship suddenly launched a beam of energy at the nearest human dreadnought. The beam hit the ship's shields and dissipated harmlessly. "Shield strength at 98%, reported Lisa. "No damage," Alan nodded. "Send a message to all ships. If the Arctarians fire again, target their weapon systems only. We want to disable, not destroy." In the Earth bunker, the video connection with Zex Thal remained active. The alien commander was speaking rapidly to his officers in their own language. "Your weapons cannot harm our ships," Susan told him, "and we have enough firepower to destroy your entire fleet, but we would prefer to avoid bloodshed." Zex Thal turned back to the screen. "What do you want?" "We want you to leave," said President Rogers. "Return to your empire and spread the word. Earth is not to be threatened. For a long moment, the alien commander was silent. Then he made a gesture to one of his officers. "Very well," he said. "We will withdraw, but know this. The Empire has many fleets. This is not over." Susan leaned forward. "Actually, Commander, it is over. You thought Earth would stay quiet. You were wrong." On the screens around the world, people watched in amazement as the alien ships began to move away from Earth. The human Dreadnoughts followed them, escorting them out of the solar system. Humanity had faced its first alien threat, and won without firing a shot. 1 week after the Arcturians left, Earth was still celebrating. People filled the streets waving flags and cheering as images of the Dreadnoughts were shown on giant screens. For the first time in history, all nations truly stood together. In Geneva, world leaders gathered to discuss what would happen next. Admiral Susan White and Colonel Alan Price sat at the main table with President Rogers and other important officials. "The Arcturians have left our solar system," Susan reported. "Our long-range sensors show they're heading back to their empire at high speed." President Rogers nodded. "But as their commander said, they have other fleets. They might return with more ships." "That's why we need to be ready," said Alan. "We've revealed our dreadnoughts now. We've lost the element of surprise, but we've gained something more important: respect." The Japanese Prime Minister spoke up. "What do we know about these Arcturians? Are there other alien species we should worry about?" Dr. Samantha Kelly stepped forward. She had been studying the data collected during the encounter. "Based on our scans of their ships and what we learned from the scout ship we found years ago, the Arcturians rule a large area of space. They've conquered at least 20 other species. But they're not the only power out there." She showed a map of nearby star systems on the big screen. "There's a whole galaxy of different civilizations, some friendly, some not. The Arcturians are just one of many. By standing up to them, we've announced our presence to everyone." The room was quiet as people thought about what this meant. "So, what do we do now?" asked the Russian president. Susan stood up. "We keep building. We improve our technology. And we reach out. There must be other species who want peace, who might become our allies. We need to find them before the Arcturians return." On the Arcturian mothership, Commander Zexthal was not happy. He stood before his communication screen, reporting to the Imperial Council. "These humans surprised us," he admitted. "They had ships hidden on their 4th planet. Many ships." The head counselor, an older Arcturian with faded blue skin, looked angry. "You retreated from a primitive world? This is unacceptable." "With respect, Counselor, there was nothing primitive about their fleet. Their ships were as advanced as ours, maybe more so. And they outnumbered us by more than 1,000 to 1. The council members talked among themselves. Finally, the head counselor spoke again. "Return to the Imperial Center. We will gather a proper fleet. 10,000 ships. We will teach these humans their place." Zexthal bowed, but he felt uneasy. He had seen the human ships up close. He wasn't sure even 10,000 Arcturian vessels would be enough. Back on Earth, the United Nations had created a new department, the Earth Space Defense Force. Admiral White was named its commander. Their job was to coordinate the Dreadnought fleet and prepare for future contact with aliens. In her new office, Susan met with Colonel Price and Dr. Kelly. "We've received a message from a species called the Veldari," she told them. "They saw our encounter with the Arcturians. They want to meet." Alan looked surprised. "Already? How did they find us so quickly?" "Apparently the galaxy has been watching us for some time," said Samantha. "Many species have observed Earth from a distance. They just never made contact because the Arcturians claimed this sector." "And now?" asked Alan. "Now they know we can defend ourselves. The Veldari say they've been fighting the Arcturian Empire for centuries. They want to discuss an alliance." Susan looked out her window at the busy Earth Space Defense headquarters. Hundreds of people worked at computer stations, monitoring space and coordinating with the Dreadnought fleet, now stationed throughout the solar system. "We should meet them," she decided, "but carefully. We still don't know who we can trust." 3 days later, a single ship entered the solar system. It was smaller than the Arcturian vessels, with a sleek design that reminded Susan of Earth's ocean animals. A delegation of Earth's leaders gathered in a special meeting room. Guards with new weapons based on alien technology stood nearby. Everyone was nervous but excited. The door opened, and the first friendly aliens humanity had ever met walked in. They were tall and slender with silver skin that seemed to shimmer. They had 2 arms and 2 legs like humans, but their heads were different, with large eyes and small mouths. "Greetings, people of Earth," said the lead alien in perfect English. "I am Ambassador Nara of the Veldari Confederation. We have come to offer friendship." President Rogers stepped forward. "We welcome you to Earth, Ambassador. We have much to discuss." The meeting lasted for hours. The Veldari explained that the galaxy was divided between several major powers. The Arcturian Empire was aggressive and dangerous, but not invincible. There were other species who valued peace and cooperation. "Your victory over the Arcturian fleet has changed everything," Ambassador Nara told them. "For centuries they have expanded unchallenged. You are the first to make them retreat." "They'll be back," said Susan. "Yes," agreed the ambassador, "with a larger force. That is why we must act quickly. Together with other free worlds, we can stand against them." As the meeting continued, Alan looked at a data pad showing the status of Earth's fleet. The factories on Mars were still working, building more dreadnoughts every day. Soon there would be truly 500,000 ships, just as they had claimed. "We need to learn more about space travel," he said to Dr. Kelly quietly. "Our ships are fast, but the Veldari vessel crossed between stars in days. We need that technology." Samantha nodded. "And weapons. And medicine. There's so much we can learn from them." Outside the meeting room, the news spread across Earth. Friendly aliens had come. After the fear of the Arcturian ships, people were ready for good news. They gathered in streets and parks, watching screens that showed the Veldari ship hovering peacefully above the United Nations building. The age of Earth being alone in the universe was over. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage, not as victims or conquests, but as equals. And it had all happened because they had prepared, because they had stayed quiet and built their strength in secret. Now the whole galaxy was listening to what Earth had to say. 6 months after meeting the Veldari, Earth had changed. Alien technology improved human lives in many ways. New medicines cured old diseases. New energy sources made power cheaper and cleaner. And Earth's fleet grew stronger with help from their new allies. Admiral Susan White stood on the observation deck of Earth's first space station built with Veldari help. It orbited between Earth and Mars, serving as headquarters for the Earth Space Defense Force. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Ambassador Nara, who stood beside her. The silver-skinned alien had become a friend over the past months. Susan nodded. "I never thought I'd see Earth from space. When I was a little girl, space travel was still difficult and rare." "Your people learn quickly," said Nara. "In just half a year, you've made progress that took other species decades." They were interrupted by an alarm. A young officer rushed into the room. "Admiral, our deep space sensors have detected a large fleet entering the outer solar system." Susan's expression turned serious. "Arcturians?" "Yes, ma'am, over 10,000 ships." It was the moment they had been preparing for. The Arcturians had returned just as they promised. "Alert all commands," Susan ordered. "Deploy the fleet, and contact the Veldari Confederation." Within hours, Earth's dreadnoughts moved into defensive positions. Now there really were 500,000 ships, just as they had claimed during the first encounter, and alongside them were 3,000 Veldari vessels, smaller but faster than human ships. On the command bridge of the EDS Defiance, Colonel Alan Price watched as the enemy approached. "They've brought a bigger fleet this time," said Major Lisa Chen. "But not big enough." Alan nodded. "Send a message to the Arcturian command ship. Let's see if they want to talk before this turns into a fight." The large screen on the bridge lit up, showing Commander Zexthal. He looked surprised to see Alan. "Human," he said. "Your defiance ends today. I have returned with the might of the Imperial fleet. Alan's face remained calm. We can see that. 10,000 ships is impressive, but you're still outnumbered 50-1. The Empire does not retreat twice, Zexthal said firmly. Surrender now or face destruction. We've made some friends since you left, Alan replied. Perhaps you recognize the Veldari ships among our fleet? For the first time, uncertainty showed on the alien commander's face. The Veldari had been fighting the Arctarian Empire for generations. Their presence alongside the humans changed things. This is your last chance, said Alan. Leave our solar system and never return, or face the consequences. The screen went dark as Zexthal cut the connection. They're powering up weapons, reported the tactical officer. Alan sighed. So be it. All ships, prepare to engage. The space between Mars and Jupiter became a battlefield as the two fleets clashed. Beams of energy crossed the darkness. Missiles left trails of light. Ships maneuvered for position. But the outcome was never really in doubt. The human and Veldari ships had better technology, better training, and greater numbers. The Arctarians fought bravely but were quickly surrounded. In the Earth Defense Headquarters, Susan watched the battle through secure feeds. President Rogers stood beside her. Can we end this without destroying them all? The president asked. Susan nodded. That's the plan. We target their engines and weapons first. We want to disable, not destroy. Within 2 hours, half the Arctarian fleet was floating helpless in space, unable to fight or flee. The rest were surrounded with no hope of escape. The screen in front of Susan lit up, showing an older Arctarian with faded blue skin. I am High, Counselor Grek of the Arctarian Empire, the alien said. I wish to discuss terms. Susan stood straight. This is Admiral Susan White of Earth. We accept your surrender on the following conditions. The Arctarian Empire will recognize Earth and all its colonies as sovereign territory, never to be attacked or invaded. The Empire will also release all worlds it has conquered and allow them to determine their own future. The High Counselor looked shocked. You demand the end of our empire? Impossible. Not the end, Susan corrected. The transformation. You can be partners instead of conquerors. You can trade instead of steal. The choice is yours. Change or be destroyed. For a long moment, the alien leader was silent. Then he made a gesture that Susan had learned was a sign of acceptance. We will consider your terms, he said reluctantly. 3 days later, representatives from Earth, the Veldari Confederation, and the Arctarian Empire met on the neutral ground of the Europa space station. After hours of discussion, they signed what would become known as the Solar System Accords. The Arctarian Empire would become the Arctarian Alliance, a partnership of worlds rather than an empire of conquered planets. Earth would join the Galactic Council as a full member, and together, they would face new challenges that threatened all species. In her private office, Susan looked at the document she had just signed. It was written in 3 languages, English, Veldari, and Arctarian. Did you ever think it would end this way? Asked Colonel Price, who stood nearby. Susan smiled slightly. Not exactly, but I always believed humanity would find its place among the stars. What happens now? Asked Dr. Kelly, who had helped create the technology that saved Earth. Now we really begin, Susan replied. This was just the first step. There's a whole galaxy out there full of wonders and dangers we can't imagine, but we'll face them together, not just as humans, but as part of something bigger. On Earth, people celebrated the news. The war was over before it had really begun. Peace had come not through weakness, but through strength and wisdom. Children looked up at the night sky with new understanding. Those distant stars weren't just beautiful lights anymore. They were places to visit, worlds to explore, civilizations to meet. Humanity had proven itself. When threatened, they hadn't panicked or surrendered. They had prepared. They had stayed, quiet until the perfect moment. Then they had revealed their true strength. The Arctarians had learned an important lesson, one that would spread throughout the galaxy. Never underestimate Earth.